They say children see things adults don't. Tonight's stories come from people who experienced terrifying encounters as kids, stories they've never been able to explain. Shadow figures, doppelgangers, ghostly visitors, strange creatures. Whether you believe them or not, these memories have stayed with them for a lifetime. Get comfortable and let's get into the stories. He saw the Hat Man decades before he knew millions of people claimed to see the exact same figure. The person who shared the story asked to remain anonymous, so we'll call him Kevin. Kevin grew up in East Asia during the 1990s when his parents traveled for missionary work and their family frequently moved from place to place. At one point, they were living in a small wooden cabin where the bathroom wasn't inside the house. It sat in a separate little building just behind it. Because of that, whenever one of the children needed to use the bathroom at night, a parent always walked them outside. One clear night around 1 a.m., 6 or 7-year-old Kevin woke his mom because he needed to go. The porch was illuminated by one of those old yellow fluorescent lights that cast an eerie glow over the yard. After Kevin finished, his mom stepped inside the bathroom herself and told him to wait outside. Standing alone, he looked around the quiet yard. That's when he noticed something, peeking around the front corner of the house. It looked like a man wearing a fedora. Only the head and hat were visible, but what made it so unsettling was that the figure was completely black, like a living silhouette. It had a sharp jawline, no facial features at all, and even though the porch light clearly illuminated the bushes behind it, none of that light seemed to touch the figure itself. Kevin was startled, but he didn't immediately think anything supernatural was happening. Older kids in the neighborhood sometimes played pranks, so he assumed someone was trying to scare him. He called out. There was no response. He called again. Still nothing. The figure didn't move, it didn't flinch, it simply seemed to stare back at him without having any eyes. Then instead of running away, young Kevin did the exact opposite. He charged straight towards it. As he ran, something strange happened. The figure didn't seem to move away, it simply began getting smaller and smaller. Kevin still can't explain fully what he saw. By the time he reached it, the figure looked almost like it was two-dimensional, like a flat shadow lying against the ground. Then it merged with the shadow being cast by a chair on the porch and vanished. Kevin immediately ran back to his mom. A few moments later, he looked again. There was nothing there. When he told his mother what had happened, she dismissed it as child's imagination. But he never forgot that image, that black silhouette wearing a hat. What makes the experience even stranger to him is that he grew up in East Asia, and as a child in the 90s, he had never been exposed to Western horror icons or stories about shadow people. He had no reason to imagine a hat-wearing figure like that. Decades later, he happened to watch a YouTube video about what's known as the Hat Man phenomenon, and he was stunned to learn that people from countries all around the world have described seeing an almost identical figure. Kevin isn't claiming what he saw was supernatural. He says it could have been a trick of the light, a childhood misunderstanding, or something else entirely. But learning that countless people around the world have reported the same shadowy figure still gives him goosebumps. What do you think? Was this simply a child's imagination? Or why do so many people from completely different cultures describe seeing the same man in the hat? I watched my brother's friend walk upstairs twice, but he only came down once. Preston still can't explain what happened in his house back in 2007. He was sitting on the living room couch, playing Guitar Hero 3 on his PlayStation 2. From where he sat, he could see the basement door, part of the dining room, and a section of the stairs leading upstairs. His older brother and several of his friends were hanging out in the basement, doing whatever teenagers did back then. Everything felt completely normal. Then the basement door opened. One of his brother's friends stepped out. We'll call him Tony. Tony didn't say a word, no smile, no expression. He simply stood there, looking at Preston for several seconds, before walking through the dining room and heading upstairs. Since the only bathroom was upstairs, Preston didn't think much of it. He kept playing his game. About 5 minutes later, the basement door opened again. It was Tony, except this time he was smiling. He asked Preston what he was playing and told him it was impressive that he could play Guitar Hero using the regular PlayStation controller instead of the guitar. Then Tony walked through the dining room and headed upstairs again. Preston immediately froze. He had never seen Tony come back downstairs. The same person had just come out of the basement twice. A few minutes later, he finally heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Tony walked back down, looked at Preston, and said, "You can come downstairs and hang out anytime you want." Then he opened the basement door and went back downstairs. To this day, Preston has no explanation for what happened, because whatever came out of that basement the first time might not have been Tony at all. So, what do you think this was? Was this a mimic, a doppelganger? Poor Preston. That's all I know. He must have been terrified. So, leave your thoughts in the comments. At 5 years old, Chris followed tapping outside and came face to face with something they still can't explain. When Chris was just 4 or 5 years old, they woke up to a tapping on their bedroom window. The strange part, the window was too high for anyone to reach without a ladder. They looked outside and saw nothing but complete darkness. Without even waking their parents, Chris somehow walked outside and headed straight for an old storage shed. Inside, they immediately felt like something was watching them. Then they looked up. Perched inside the triangular window wasn't a person, but a tall, impossibly thin black figure. It wasn't standing on the glass. It looked like it was trapped inside the glass itself. It was darker than black, with shimmering edges like oil floating on water. Then it moved. With one impossibly long step, it was suddenly inches from Chris's face. They couldn't scream. They couldn't move. The creature's head split open into a massive mouth, exploding with blinding geometric colors, while a deafening sound like millions of low trumpets filled Chris's entire body. Then, everything went black. When Chris came to, they were standing back inside at the front door. They had no idea how they got there. Decades later, they still occasionally catch glimpses of the same figure, especially around dusk. Sometimes it appears in dreams. Sometimes they wake up feeling it's standing beside the bed. Chris says they've learned one thing. The moment they stop being afraid, the figure always disappears. So what do you think Chris encountered that night? A childhood nightmare? A paranormal entity? Or something we still can't explain? To understand what people are actually going through, you have to look back in time. These black stick men aren't just a fake internet story. People have been seeing these flat, featureless shapes for over 50 years. Back in 1964, a person in New York saw a giant, blurry figure. In 1978, some teenagers in England saw one wearing a hat. Around the same time, a fisherman in Spain watched a 10-foot-tall, skinny shadow walking along the beach. What makes this so strange is that all these different people, who lived before the internet and never met, described the exact same things. They all saw the same weird, jerky movement. Even scarier, they all experienced the exact same thing with time. They would look at the figure, blink, and then suddenly realize hours had passed in a second. Whether people see them on dark roads or right in their own bedrooms, these figures leave a real, lasting mark on the people who find them. If you have any thoughts or words of encouragement for Chris, please leave them in the comments. A 3-year-old kept waking up to tiny creatures stabbing her with miniature spears, and they disappeared the day the crib was gone. This is Annie's mother's story, and to this day Mimi swears every word is true. When Mimi was about 3 years old, her mother brought home a second-hand crib. Over the years, the story of where it came from changed. At first, she said she found it sitting near the trash. Later, she claimed it had come from a relative. Not long after Mimi started sleeping in it, something terrifying began happening. She says tiny creatures about the size of an adult's hand would climb into her crib. They weren't cute garden gnomes. She described them as looking much more like the gremlins from the movie. There were several of them. Some carried tiny briefcase-like boxes. Others held miniature spears. They would surround the crib, laugh, and repeatedly jab her while she clung to the rails crying. It didn't happen every night, but it happened often enough that Mimi still remembers it decades later. Then one day the crib was gone. Whether it was thrown away or passed on to someone else, she's not sure. But from that moment forward, the creatures never returned. Years later, Mimi asked her mother about it. Without hesitation, she knew exactly which crib Mimi meant, almost as if she'd always suspected there was something wrong with it. So what could explain a story like this? Because it happened in the Chicago area, some people point to the Great Lakes indigenous legends about mysterious little people, including beings called pukwudgies, who were said to use tiny spears and torment anyone who crossed their path. Others point to Mimi's Germanic ancestry, where folklore tells of kobolds, household spirits that could attach themselves to objects and become hostile if disturbed. Then there's the crib itself. Many paranormal traditions claim that certain objects can become haunted or carry an unexplained attachment. And the fact that everything stopped the moment that crib disappeared makes people wonder if the crib was the real source of whatever Mimi experienced. So what do you think? Was this nothing more than the vivid imagination of a 3-year-old? Or was something else waiting inside that old crib? Please leave your comments for Mimi and Annie below. Have you ever seen something as a kid that still haunts you decades later? When V was 5 years old, she was sleeping over at a friend's house the night her friend lost a tooth. Both girls were so excited, they couldn't wait for the tooth fairy to show up. They fell asleep on a couch in the living room, heads at the opposite ends, feet facing each other. Sometime in the middle of the night, V woke up needing to use the bathroom. That's when she saw it. Standing in the archway between the living room and the kitchen was a woman, and she was impossibly tall. Her head nearly touched the top of the archway. At first, V thought it had to be the tooth fairy, but something felt horribly wrong. The figure didn't look human. She couldn't make out a face. There were no eyes. There were no features at all. It was almost as if she was transparent, but she was outlined by a strange purple glow. And she was wearing what V could only describe as a giant cupcake-shaped dress. Worst of all, she wasn't moving. She was just standing there, staring directly at her. Even at 5 years old, V got the feeling that this thing wanted her to know it was there. Terrified, she started kicking her friend, trying to wake her up, but without making it obvious. But her friend only grumbled and rolled over. The figure never looked away. Finally, V turned her back to it. She was too scared to keep looking. Minutes felt like hours. Eventually, she worked up the courage to check again. The woman was still standing there, still watching. At that point, V gave up on the idea of going to the bathroom. She lay frozen on the couch, pretending the figure wasn't real, until she somehow just drifted back to sleep. The next morning, she immediately checked under her friend's pillow. The tooth? It was still there. The tooth fairy had never come. For years, V convinced herself that that's what she'd seen. But she's 32 years old now, and she still can't explain the towering woman in the glowing purple outline who stood silently in that doorway all night. Even her mother remembers her talking about it afterwards. So, what do you think V saw that night? I honestly want you to leave comments because I have no idea. I have no theories or anything. You know, sometimes as kids we do see things. I know I've seen many things as a child. I saw many things that I still can't explain. I've Googled, no answers. So I get it. V would probably like to see if there's anybody else out there who has an idea of what this could be. So leave it in the comments, please. A 9-year-old girl crashed her bike alone at night near Fort Amador, Panama, and 2 mysterious nuns appeared out of nowhere. Minutes later, they vanished without a trace. The person who shared the story wanted to remain anonymous, so we're going to call her Maria. When Maria was 9 years old, her parents owned a food business in Amador, Panama, a bustling tourist area near the entrance to the Panama Canal. Because they worked long hours, she spent more time there than she did at home. She loved riding her bike. She rode everywhere, sometimes into places she wasn't supposed to go, and more than once, she stayed out far later than she should have. One night after dark, Maria rode to a quiet roadside near a museum with a large cube-shaped structure. The area was mostly open with only a few bushes nearby. She remembers how silent it was. She could see the road in every direction and hear the smallest sounds. There wasn't another person in sight. As she rode, her front tire struck a rock, sending her tumbling to the ground. Falling off her bike wasn't unusual, so she brushed herself off, grabbed her bicycle, and started lifting it back up. Then she looked up. Standing directly in front of her were two nuns. One wore a white habit, the other wore black. Both women were incredibly pale, but neither seemed frightening. Instead, the nun in white gently asked if she was hurt or lost. The nun in black spoke very little, quietly helping pick up the bicycle. Maria says they stood there talking for 5 to 7 minutes. She can't remember what they talked about anymore, but she remembers exactly how she felt. As a child, she was naturally suspicious of strangers. Yet with these two women, she felt completely safe, completely calm. It was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Years later, she can still picture every detail. The nun in the white habit had striking light blue eyes. She looked European and spoke with what Maria believes may have been a Scottish accent. The nun in black had dark green eyes, a scar on the right side of her lower lip, and was missing the little finger on her left hand. Both wore identical gold cross necklaces. Finally, the nun in white smiled and said, "Have a wonderful night." Maria glanced toward the road only for a second. When she turned back, they were gone. They were not walking away. They were not running. They were not hiding in the bushes. They were just gone. She says there was absolutely no way they could have disappeared that quickly. The area was so quiet she would have heard footsteps if they'd walked away. There was nowhere nearby they could have hidden, and she never heard a single sound. To this day, Maria doesn't know who or what they were. She isn't particularly religious, and she doesn't consider herself someone who believes in ghosts or the paranormal, but she has never forgotten that night. What's fascinating is the history of the place where it happened. Long before Amador became a popular tourist destination, it was home to Fort Amador, a heavily fortified U.S. military base that operated throughout much of the 20th century. The former canal zone was filled with military hospitals, chapels, schools, and charitable missions. During the construction and early operation of the Panama Canal, people from all over the world, including European and American religious orders, came to serve as nurses, teachers, and missionaries. Maria's memory of one nun having European features and what sounded like a Scottish accent fits within that remarkable international history. There's another possible explanation rooted in folklore. Throughout Panama and much of Latin America, there are stories of what folklorists call the phantom helper or the vanishing Samaritan. Witnesses describe mysterious priests, monks, or nuns appearing on lonely roads to help someone in distress. They often bring an overwhelming feeling of peace, offer comfort or assistance, and then disappear the moment the witness looks away. Unlike legends such as La Llorona or La Tuluvieja, these mysterious figures aren't considered malevolent. They're remembered as protectors, strangers who appear exactly when they're needed most. So did Maria simply meet two kind women whose disappearance she couldn't explain? Or did she encounter something that's been part of local folklore for generations? What do you think happened that night? Please leave your comments below. When Jay was 12 years old, he went on a family camping trip in western Tennessee that he would never forget. His family usually stayed in an RV, but this time they decided to try something different: tent camping. The first day was perfect. Jay and his sisters explored the creek, played in the leaves, and enjoyed being outdoors while their parents set up camp. That night, after dinner, the family climbed into their tent and settled in. There were no phones, no distractions, just a family spending time together before eventually falling asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, Jay woke up needing to use the bathroom. Still half asleep, he quietly stepped outside. Since he was a kid and didn't want to walk all the way to the bathrooms, he went near the trees instead. That's when he noticed something. Near the campground bathrooms stood a tall, shadowy figure. At first, Jay wasn't afraid. He figured someone else had probably woken up and needed to use the bathroom too. But as he finished and started walking back toward the tent, he noticed the figure hadn't moved. It was just standing there, watching. Jay hurried back inside, zipped up the tent, and looked out one last time. The figure was gone. The next morning, Jay told his family about the tall person he had seen. His dad and older sister joked that it must have been Slender Man, and they laughed about it. Everyone treated it like a funny camping story, but Jay couldn't shake the feeling that something about it was strange. That night, he woke up again. This time, he heard footsteps. Slow footsteps. Someone was walking across the wooden deck beneath their tent. Jay sat up and listened carefully. He counted everyone inside. His parents, his sisters, all 5 of them were there. But someone or something was outside. The footsteps slowly circled the tent before moving toward the stairs and then disappearing into the woods behind the campsite. Jay stayed awake the rest of the night, too scared to go outside and too nervous to wake his parents. The next day, he finally told his mom what happened. She reassured him that he was probably dreaming or that it could have been an animal. But that night, things got worse. While everyone slept, Jay heard a loud crack outside. Then came footsteps. This time they were faster. Something walked around the tent, brushing against the fabric. Jay could feel the tent shift as whatever was outside moved along the side. Then he heard it, the zipper on the back flap of the tent slowly opening. Terrified, Jay woke his mom and begged her to wake his dad. His father grabbed a flashlight and searched outside, but there was nothing. There was no person, there were no footsteps, and there was no explanation for what happened. Then came the final night of the trip. By this point, Jay was terrified to even sleep in the tent. Sometime after midnight, he heard footsteps again. Slow, dragging footsteps moving through the gravel outside. They stopped right beside the tent. Then, something sharp pressed against the fabric. At first, Jay thought it was a stick. Then it broke through. A blade started cutting down the side of the tent. Jay screamed. His entire family woke up in a panic as they saw a hand pushing through the opening. Then, Jay saw something looking inside. A pale face, yellow eyes, a twisted smile. Years later, Jay admits he doesn't know if it was exhaustion and fear that affected what he saw, but in the moment it felt so real. His dad grabbed his weapon and cocked it. The sound was enough. The face disappeared. Whatever had been outside ran across the wooden deck and into the woods. Jay's father searched the area but found nothing. There was no person or weapon or tracks left behind. The police arrived shortly afterwards and searched the campground, but they never found an explanation. The family packed up the next morning and left. But Jay still thinks about what happened all those years ago. At the time, his family had already been dealing with a frightening situation back home involving a neighbor who made them feel unsafe. Because of that, Jay has always wondered, was it someone who had followed them from home? Was it a random person trying to scare them or pull a cruel prank? Or was it something more sinister? Jay says that memory will always be part of his childhood. And even now, he doesn't find tent camping fun anymore. Because no matter how peaceful the woods may seem, Jay will always remember what was outside his tent that night. And I have to say, I'm sorry, Jay, that this experience ruined your love for camping and camping in a tent even. I do, and I will always go back to saying that I do believe the most dangerous thing we find in the woods is another person or people in general. So what do you think was outside Jay's tent that night? Please leave a comment for Jay. 2 boys apologized to the woods and something accepted their apology. The person who shared this story wanted to remain anonymous, so we're going to call him Derek. Derek had spent every weekend mountain biking with his friend through the back roads around Huntington, Massachusetts. They knew every trail, every turn, and every stretch of dirt road, until one ride made them quit forever. One afternoon, while riding home down an isolated dirt road with no houses anywhere nearby, something suddenly shot out of the trees. Both boys stopped. They assumed it was another friend trying to scare them. He had pulled pranks before, so they called him out. But there was no answer. Then a rock came flying towards Derek's head. It missed. A second rock struck his hand. Sticks started flying from the woods. Derek dropped his bike and ran behind a tree. His friend did the same. When Derek looked over, he saw his friend's face had been cut from one of the flying objects. They yelled into the woods that the prank wasn't funny. That was a mistake. Suddenly, the entire forest exploded. Rocks, sticks, and even large tree branches began flying from the woods. There were so many objects coming at them that it felt impossible. It looked like dozens of people were throwing them at once. Some of the branches were far too large for a person to throw. Even stranger, none of the objects seemed to arc through the air. They traveled in perfectly straight lines, disappearing deep into the woods behind them. The attack lasted nearly 10 minutes. Finally, Derek's friends started yelling that they were sorry and they would leave. Derek shouted the same thing. Instantly, everything stopped. There were no more rocks or sticks, just complete silence. The two boys slowly stepped out from behind the tree, and that's when Derek saw something that terrified him more than the attack itself. Across the road sat an old rundown shack. The problem was that they had ridden that exact road hundreds of times. The shack had never been there. It wasn't there when they stopped their bikes, but now it sat directly across from them. As they grabbed their bikes, they heard the slow squeal of a door hinge opening. Neither of them looked. They rode away as fast as they could. That was the last time Derek and his friend ever went mountain biking together. In fact, it was the last time Derek ever got on a mountain bike at all. And if you think the only thing hiding in the woods of Huntington, Massachusetts is Bigfoot, think again. Local folklore tells a much darker tale about a creature called the Pukwudgie. Rooted in ancient Native American legends, these are knee-high, gray-skinned forest tricksters that are fiercely protective of their territory. Their behavior perfectly matches this backcountry road encounter. Unlike Bigfoot, who throws solitary, heavy boulders, Pukwudgies hunt in packs. They use supernatural speed to launch rapid-fire barrage of debris, moving so fast it creates the illusion of a dozen attackers. But what about the massive tree branches? According to Algonquian lore, Pukwudgies are powerful elemental spirits that rely on magic, not muscle. They can telekinetically manipulate the forest, propelling heavy branches and stones with bullet-like velocity. This explains the terrifying physics the boys witnessed. Massive objects defying gravity, zipping past them in a perfectly straight line with absolutely no natural arc. Pukwudgies are also highly intelligent. The moment the boys shouted an apology and promised to leave, the attack instantly stopped, proving the entities fully understood them. As for the mysterious shack that completely vanished later, Pukwudgies are absolute masters of magical illusion, known to materialize phantom structures just to disorient anyone who dares to trespass on their road. So what do you think? Was this a coordinated Pukwudgie ambush, or is there something else hiding in the Huntington backcountry? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for spending part of your evening with me. I truly appreciate every single one of you who listens, comments, and supports this little corner of the internet. It means more than you know. If you've had a strange experience, whether it happened in childhood or just last week, I would love to hear it. You can leave a comment below, or you can send your story to the email in my description so you could be featured in a future episode. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good scary story and mystery. And before you go, I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you think children really experience things that adults can't? Or is there another explanation? Sleep well, and I'll meet you again at midnight.